Hey friends, today I'm making broke meals. These are dinners that only use a few ingredients. I'm making one recipe with ground beef and another recipe that was inspired by a meal that Jimmy Kimmel makes for his family. You'll need to have at least one type of bouillon in your pantry, whether that's chicken flavor, beef, or vegetable bouillon, whatever it is that you've got in your pantry that you think that you might want to use. And then you're also going to need some cornstarch to use as a thickener. You can make the recipe without it, but it's definitely going to be better with. Okay, to get started, I picked up this ground beef and I did what I always do when I want to purchase ground beef. I Google ground beef, I find out who has it on sale, and in this case, it was Albertsons again, and it usually is Albertsons. So then I take a screenshot of this showing that it's $2.99 a pound, and then of course when I get in the store, they don't have the $2.99 a pound, so you have to ask at the meat counter, and then they package the amount of meat that you want. But it is this long process that I have to go through, but I am willing to do that to get this meat for $2.99 a pound because you guys, ground beef can be $7.99 a pound right now. So I basically saved enough money to pay for the second meal. I'll be using these wide egg noodles, but you can also use rice or potatoes. And I have a bag that's already open in the pantry. And then we're going to need some bouillon for a sauce, and I've got chicken flavor and beef flavor. I usually do like to use chicken flavor bouillon in these types of recipes, but since it is a beef recipe, maybe I'll use half and half. And then I'm going to use cornstarch to thicken my sauce. And then maybe I'll just use some pepper, but you can add whatever other spices that you want into the mix. And then I'm going to separate this. I thought I would make 3 meals with this. I don't know how many I'll get to in this video, but I'm going to separate this into thirds. I am going to season my ground beef with a little garlic, salt, and pepper. There are so many different options for making this same recipe. If you're a vegetarian or vegan, obviously you can swap out the hamburger for a plant-based product. You can either use the burger crumbles or you can use something like the Impossible Burger would work here as well. And here I'm just going to absorb some of the oil with a piece of paper towel. There's not a lot, and I can get most of it with this, but you can also drain this with a strainer if you'd rather. You have lots of options for the type of seasoning that you use, but I'm just going to use half and half chicken bouillon and beef bouillon. I'm going to add it to the meat, and then I'll add in the water, and then I'll let this simmer for a few minutes before adding my pasta. And at this time, I'm going to add a teaspoon of cornstarch mixed in cold water. And then I'll check this later to see if I need to add any more. And then after I let this simmer for a few minutes, I took a taste of it to see if it was the level that I wanted, and it was perfect. So now I'll add my noodles. And the right ratio of noodle to beef to sauce is very important to me, and I think this looks about right. The package says that these will cook in 8 minutes, so I'm going to start checking these at 7 minutes. If you want, rather than use the egg noodles, like I said earlier, you can always use slices of potatoes, or you can use rice or a different kind of pasta. That's one of the things I like about this kind of recipe is you can always mix it up and then it becomes a new dish. So it never gets old. And then I'm just going to add a touch more of the cornstarch here to get it to the level that I want. By adding just a small amount at a time, you're able to control the thickness better and get the exact consistency. Now, if you wanted to, you could also add some sour cream in at the end and you could turn this into a stroganoff. You could add some mushrooms to this. But for me, I'm just making the beef with noodles, basically mimicking the hamburger helper. And the flavor on this is outstanding and such a simple, easy meal to throw together. It's one of the reasons I love having bouillon in the pantry. I served this alongside a roll, which I thought was going to be perfect for sopping up that delicious sauce. It was delicious. The noodles were cooked perfectly. In my opinion, you always need to cook your noodles perfectly. Otherwise, it's just a soggy mess and it ruins the whole dish. So make sure that you do that. And I added some pepper to the top and decided to give this to my youngest son, who just happened to be at home and hungry at the time. And he really enjoyed this. With today's prices, this meal comes in at about $1.50 without the bread. One of my viewers mentioned this recipe and I thought it was perfect for the channel. To start out with, we'll be using 1 can of cannellini beans. I'll be using 1 clove of garlic and then the pasta of your choice. I have some fusilli and I also have some cavatappi on hand. I do love cavatappi, so I'm going to go ahead and use that. But you can pick up any of the pastas at Walmart. They still have boxes of pasta at $1.18, and I think Trader Joe's has some still for $1. So you can basically select anything you want. I am going with a heartier pasta like cavatappi. I think the bigger, thicker pastas are going to work better in this recipe, but who knows, it might even work well with spaghetti. And as you saw, I heavily salted my water so that when my pasta is finished cooking, it's already going to be perfectly seasoned. I'm going to pour off just a small amount of this bean broth, and then I'm going to hold on to the broth in case I need it for later use. And I'm basically just following exactly the way Jimmy Kimmel made his. But obviously, if you want to throw the beans in a blender, you can do that. You could probably use a hand masher. Sometimes the canned beans can be a little firm, so it might be easier if you cook them a little more before you mash them up with a hand masher, if that's the only option you have. And I made this al dente because I am going to cook this a little bit more in the pan. I made a little extra pasta because I'm going to show a few variations on this recipe. I'll make one exactly the way Jimmy Kimmel made his, and then I'm going to do 2 other versions just to see how I like it. Unfortunately, I did spill a small amount of this, but that's okay because I still have plenty left for the dish. I thought I would try it just like this, and it's surprisingly good without anything even added to it. But I'm going to go ahead and chop up this garlic, and when Jimmy Kimmel cooked it, he left his clove whole, but I'm just going to cut this in 3 pieces, and then basically you're going to cook it in the oil and it's going to season the oil. Then you can pull the garlic clove out, and then you have the nice flavor of garlic in the dish without the clove. I myself love garlic, so I don't mind leaving those big chunks in. You could also obviously chop it up into smaller pieces if you wanted to, but having the large clove is also a nice option for some people that can't have garlic but can actually have the seasoned oil. The most important part is to not burn the garlic because it does become bitter when it's burnt and it just ruins the flavor. So if you do accidentally burn your garlic, then just pull it out and start over again. It's usually best to just cook on a very low temperature, but as per usual, I am cooking fast because I'm always in a hurry. And I did decide to go ahead and chop up this garlic and just leave it in the dish because I don't mind biting into garlic, and it seemed like a waste for me to throw it out. But that's just me. If you want, just pick out the garlic clove. And then I seasoned the oil with some salt and pepper. And then I'm going to add in a small amount of the bean mixture. I also reserved some liquid from the pasta, which I plan to add into this to thin it out. And this is looking a lot like gravy, which is making me think of other options for using these canned beans. I think I would like to sample this as a gravy over bread, but first I do need to thin it out a bit. And so I've got my pasta water. And remember that this pasta water is perfectly seasoned already because it does have some salt in there. I was thinking what a great broke meal this would be for just the beans on a piece of toast. Basically, it would be high protein, lots of fiber, and let me tell you, this tastes delicious, just like it is. And it actually kind of does taste like gravy. It's very strange that it would taste so similar to gravy. And I'll talk more about using this as a gravy later in the video. And the next step is to add a small amount of chicken bouillon seasoning. But of course, you can also use any kind of vegetable seasoning. And I did play around with some options for meals on this, but I do just want to first show you Jimmy Kimmel's recipe. So I added the rest of the beans in here and thinned this out, and then I added my seasoning. And I'm just using a small amount, but you can always season to taste. Wow, that's actually very tasty. In the video where Jimmy Kimmel is making this, he says, I use the beans because it's healthier and the kids never know that it has beans in it. And then you can hear his daughter saying, that has beans in it? So she might decide that she doesn't like it now. But you really cannot tell when you taste this. It just tastes like creamy goodness. This is surprisingly good. I mean, I thought I would like it, but I didn't think I would like it this much. And I think if you serve this to someone, they would never know that there's beans in here. It just tastes nice and savory, and it provides a nice thick coating for the beans. I mean, it's definitely a comfort meal. You're just not going to believe how good this is until you actually try it yourself. You can always play around with the seasonings, like I said. And as soon as I saw this, I knew that there was something that I would want to do if I were to make this for myself on a regular basis, that I would want to add in some type of greens and maybe something acidic. So I had some spinach on hand, so I added that in, and then I added a little pasta water. And then earlier I had roasted some tomatoes. And for that, I just grabbed a few cherry tomatoes, but you could also use a Roma tomato cut up in fourths. And I just added some pepper and oil and put that in the oven to bake. And it results in a nice sweet roasted tomato. And of course, if you don't have cherry tomatoes, you can always use Roma tomatoes. Just cut those into smaller pieces, and you're going to get the same effect with the roasted tomatoes being sweet. I thought this dish would be fabulous with some acidity added in. So that's where the tomatoes come into play. And I guess this bowl that I'm using is a little too large, but it's okay. I wanted to use this beautiful bowl because this cheap meal that we were making is now turning into a fancy one, just with the addition of a couple of ingredients. And probably almost anything you have in the fridge in terms of vegetables is going to work in this dish. I think it would be great with mushrooms. I think it would be great with carrots, peppers, really, there's a lot of different things I think that would work here. Probably also a good dish for just those random leftover pieces of items that you have in the fridge. For me, that's always zucchini. I always have at least a small piece. This was phenomenal. I enjoyed this so much. I actually liked it always. I like this just the basic way, the inexpensive way, just with the can of beans and the pasta. That was good. And then each item that you start adding in, it's just even better. So I think that this is a great recipe hack to make your meals healthier. Not only do the beans add a nice, rich gravy, but it adds protein and fiber into the dish. This was so good that I literally would have licked the plate if I could have. And I did try this earlier without any bouillon, with just the beans and the garlic and the pepper. And you know what? It was really delicious just like that. So even if you don't have any bouillon, I would still try this. I think adding that extra addition of the bouillon just kind of kicked it up a notch. And then it completely disguises the beans. You have no idea that this is made with beans. This meal inspired me so much that I kept thinking of new ways that I wanted to try this. And I had this macaroni and cheese box, so I thought I would see what it would taste like with the blended beans in this with the cheese and the macaroni. I thought this would make a healthier version of macaroni and cheese. And also Jimmy Kimmel did add cheese at the end of his dish. He suggested adding some shaved Parmesan, which of course is very good, but it just got me thinking about how cheese would be an addition here. So I mixed this together and I tried this and it was okay. I probably wouldn't make it again. Honestly, I don't really like these little noodles in here. And I think I actually like that old-fashioned kind of macaroni. Great Value makes a mac and cheese that has one that I might rather try. But anyway, that's an option if some people want to try it. This version just didn't do it for me. When I was making this, I was like, this looks and tastes like gravy. And so I wanted to try it this way. This has the perfect gravy consistency and this tastes delicious. So this is another good option for a super cheap meal or snack. Basically for about $2 you can get a can of those beans, and then you can get one of those French bread loaves from Walmart for $1, and you could basically have the blended beans over toast. I was trying to find some shots of gravy over toast. I know I've made those at different times in videos, but I couldn't find any footage, so I actually just grabbed this. And I think this was a tuna dish that I had made on one of those videos. It was a Make It to Payday video. So I'll link that at the end of this video. But I love the idea of using blended beans as a gravy. It just makes sense for budget cooking. And it's so delicious, especially when you add in that bouillon seasoning. And also, what if we tried these blended beans on top of Southern biscuits? I think that would be really delicious. And it would also help to up the protein for your breakfast. The amount of ways that we can use this for budget cooking is endless. Thanks so much for watching, friends. I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. I'll see you next Sunday.
Morning has broken, my windows are open. Wanna feel the wind blow through my hair. Which way do I follow? What happens tomorrow? I turn to you and hope you can guide the way. Sometimes I give up, just wanna be on my own. Even in the darkest times, you give me hope. So